Hello, everyone. Today I'm joined by Anush Vinod, CEO of Aplos, and Meera Patel, COO of Aplos, and both Wharton grads. Hello, both. Where are you guys dialing in from today?
Hey, Julian. I'm dialing in from San Francisco.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm dialing in from New York.
Awesome. Thank you both for joining the podcast. I'm super excited to have two Wharton grads and really excited to hear more about the work that you guys do at Aplos. Before we sort of dive into details, can you guys tell me a little bit more about your role, what the company is, and how you guys found yourself at Aplos together?
Well, I'm Anush. I'm the CEO of Aplos. I joined in December of 2021 when our investors acquired the business and have been CEO since. Before I was at Aplos, I ran another portfolio company for Alpine investors called Y Design Group. And then before that, I actually had just graduated from Wharton. And my background before business school was in finance. I spent a number of years in banking, private equity, a very brief stint in operations, and now here at Alpine helping to run Aplos.
I started out in consulting. I was working at Deloitte in the federal space. And then I had a brief stint in product. I took advantage of COVID and having a gap year. And so I got to work for a couple early stage startups. And then I ended up at ServiceNow for a summer just to see what product would look like at a big tech org. I think I left that summer feeling pretty strongly that product was a lot of fun and I was looking for something else. So I ended up at Alpine. Luckily, I had met Anush when I was at Wharton, so I got to learn a little bit more about the program. And by happen chance, ended up matching back at Aplos. And so now we're working together. I'm the COO here. I started out running our post-sale teams and then eventually have taken on a little bit more responsibility as time has gone on and just passed my 2-year mark.
Awesome. You guys both mentioned sort of like the Alpine program and the fact that Alpine is the owner of Aplos and you guys both found your way to Aplos through that. Can you maybe describe sort of like what drew you to that program? I mean, Meera, you came from sort of like working in big tech in your summer internship, and Anush, you came from the finance background. So going to the Alpine CEO and training program doesn't seem like necessarily a natural next progression. So what particularly drew you guys there?
Yeah, I'll go first. I think we both had different reasons for what brought us here. But maybe the theme for me was doing a lot of exploration during business school and feeling really grateful to have that time. But ultimately, I think I landed here out of a place of frustration more than it was anything else. I appreciated a lot of aspects of consulting. It just wasn't quite right. And then there was a lot that I really enjoyed about product that I didn't get in consulting when it came to having a lot more autonomy over decisions, really taking ownership over certain projects in a way you just couldn't do in consulting. And at the same time, the bigger the company got as a product manager, the smaller and smaller my scope got, and it just got less exciting for me. Alpine wasn't necessarily the natural transition, but the more I learned about the program and the opportunities, I found that you're able to craft the role that makes most sense for you and that you're most excited about joining. So that's how I landed here.
Yeah, my story is interesting too, because I think it also has the theme of frustration in there. I spent a lot of my career in finance sitting on the other side of the table from really great operators and founders who built these amazing companies. I think I'd always had an itch to be an entrepreneur, but never had quite the risk profile. I think the more and more I spent time in finance, I started in banking and then I went into private equity, the closer and closer and closer I got from advisory to investing to, I actually want to be in the arena and want to be on the other side of the table. Now, to be clear, I had no freaking idea what that meant, but I just knew that I wanted to be on that side. And I got my taste of operating in between my first and second year at business school, worked at a software company that sold defense tech and was functioning as chief of staff and loved the job. I love the dumbest parts of the job too, like writing up policy papers, and I configured their instance of Pardot and did a couple of other really small things that I was like, this is so much more interesting than what I had been doing previously. Yeah, very similar to Meera, I think wanted to be in a role where I could have a lot of ownership and have a lot of impact on something that I was involved in. And the type of impact I wanted was broad scale. So I wanted to be involved on every team and to be able to influence it a little bit. And I think that is exactly how the program has played out for me. And I think it's been really, really fun to be part of it.
Yeah. The next question I have is I kind of want to take a double click into both your roles. And I think a lot of people coming out of business school are used to the day-to-day life of like a PM, a product designer, strategy and ops. But the CEO and sort of like the upper level management roles are probably a little bit less known to a lot of our listeners. So starting with you, Anush, could you maybe walk us through like what your typical day as CEO looks like at Aplos? I mean, you kind of mentioned getting into the nitty gritty and just kind of talking to a bunch of different teams, but take us into sort of a day in the life.
Yeah, well, I wish there was a modal or average day in the life. It's so different. Every single day is so different. Every week is so different. But I'll tell you a little bit about my favorite days. I think that will help paint a really interesting picture of the role. I think my favorite days are days in which I'm working on many different things. So I'm starting the morning with a call with our CTO talking about what's on the product roadmap. I'm then moving to a call with our VP of sales to talk about what's in the pipeline and how we're going to hit close on deals. I'm moving into the afternoon and maybe having a quick conversation with a board member on the M&A strategy of the business and on how we're doing financially. And then I'm ending the day with Meera and talking about our revenue plan for next year. In that day, I think I'm focused on a lot of tactical stuff in the morning and a lot of strategic stuff in the evening. And it kind of moves very well with how my brain operates. But broadly, I think the best days are the days in which you spend time with people who you care about a lot and who you want to help out and who you want to work with. And it also involves a lot of time with really interesting problems. Like I just painted a picture of 4 different things that I worked on throughout the day, each of which requires a different level of involvement from me, whether it's actually doing something or helping someone and coaching someone. And I love the variety of that day. I think a lot of our best days are also spent with customers. Those are also really fun days because you can see the impact you're having in their day-to-day life.
What about you, Meera? Because when I think of CEO, I always think of like CEO of Nestle and you're worrying about supply chains, but obviously that's less the case in a software business. So what does the CEO of a software business do on a day-to-day basis? And who are your main sort of touch points within the company?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I've spoken with a number of different COOs of software businesses, and it sounds like it's all very different depending on the role. And I think that's what makes it so fun. There's probably a lot of similarities with what Anush says. No day is the same. Certainly no week is the same. I think the way that my role as COO has evolved has been starting out with a number of teams and then over time expanding responsibility and reach throughout the rest of the organization. So sometimes I might be leaning into helping interview for a department that isn't my own and helping hire product managers just because I used to work as one. And then other days might be getting in the weeds of how we're going to close a very specific deal on a sales team. And then it'll be talking to Anush about what's going on with our upcoming board meeting and how we want to present our cross-sell strategy for next year. There's a lot of variety, which I appreciate. The way that I've looked at the role has been a factor of being able to grow for myself, but then also helping my teams grow and have a bigger impact over time. The things that tend to cause a lot of variety will sometimes look like what the problems are today or where the opportunities are. And sometimes you're in firefighting mode as a COO and you're putting out some of those fires, whether it's to do with people and the organization, folks not getting along, departments not being able to work effectively together, and it's causing a lot of roadblocks down the line. Other times it gets to be a lot more strategic and you get to work with folks who are very energetic about seeing an opportunity in front of them and wanting to go figure out a plan to go tackle it.
It sounds like super varied in terms of both your guys' role, which I guess is what ultimately drew you guys to the positions. Another question I have is both of you guys have probably managed teams before, whether you at your prior roles within the Alpine program and Meera maybe as a consultant and sort of your initial roles within Alpine. What's sort of like the biggest change in going from managing a team of 5 people to now you managing a large company? Same thing for you, Meera, managing multiple large teams. What's that step up kind of look like?
It is bonkers. It is truly bonkers. I went from managing nobody to then managing a team of, I think my first team, I started out with 35 people?
40?
Yeah. It's nuts. And partially because I had not managed somebody before. When you're in consulting and in product, you lead with influence. The cool part about the job is recognizing there's a lot that you can't prep for. You just have to learn it. And I think specifically when it comes to managing people, the most rewarding part has been finding how much will come naturally to you just from wanting to be a good manager, a leader, support system, and coach for the folks who work for you. So I think that's where I've noticed myself, but also a lot of my peers, you can surprise yourself just because you want to be able to lead people well. And if you care about it, you probably do a pretty good job.
Learn by fire, basically. It's exactly what it sounds like, honest. You got to make the mistake before you can be able to learn. Awesome. I loved hearing so much about your guys' roles, but I think I kind of want to now take another double click into sort of Aplos and what the company actually does. And I would first like to start with who are your typical customers and what, if you had to describe as your core product that you guys ultimately sell to those customers?
Aplos is a really interesting business. We're a SaaS company, a modern cloud-based SaaS company that builds technology for nonprofits. We started this journey with the belief that the nonprofit industry is largely bereft of really good technology. Not only do you see this in what they use, but you see this in how they feel about the technologies they use. And so it became our mission pretty quickly to find and own and operate the best technologies that help nonprofits run their day-to-day. That's fundamentally what Aplos does. We have 3 brands and 3 technologies. Aplos, which is our core accounting software. Raisely, which is our core fundraising business. We help nonprofits raise money online through donation forms and high-powered event opportunities. And then Keela is our CRM and email automation tool. And those are all businesses that we are bringing together and products that we are bringing together to serve, I think, what becomes the ultimate need in the nonprofit space, which is a fully integrated tool set across the most important technologies that nonprofits use every day. Very interesting company, very interesting opportunity, and I think a place we're excited to have a lot of impact.
Taking a step back and looking at the space, I mean, was one of the opportunities for Aplos just the fact that there's no dedicated software for them, or was it just like that was done poorly and therefore like by designing sort of like a better version of what was already out there, there was a big opportunity?
I think what we see in the market is a lot of players out there who offer subpar technology and nonprofits feeling like they have to pick between a rock and a hard place. And ultimately, I think that has magnified all the issues that nonprofits have in their day-to-day, like being able to close their books every month, being able to figure out who they raise money from, being able to understand who their most engaged donors are. Those are all really essential questions and problems that technology can enable or it can hinder. And a lot of what the market looks like today are technologies that hinder nonprofits from being able to answer those most essential questions. So we see it as both an opportunity to bring great technology around to more nonprofits and to heighten the quality bar in the space, which I think has been lacking. Meera, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's right. The way that I talk about it internally has been nonprofits have these very specific pain points that nobody else has been able to solve. And we were very intentional about the products that we're bringing together, being able to solve those pain points for nonprofits. Other competitors in the market either started out doing it well and started losing some of the other aspects that were really important to them. So for nonprofits, it's not just about the software, but it's also about how you enable them in the software. What are the services you can provide with it? What's the support for when they get stuck in the software? Because a lot of nonprofits are operating with volunteers and part-time resources. So how can you best equip folks with the software that you're providing and just take a little bit more of a holistic approach? I think that's what we do differently. And when Anush talks about having to choose between a rock and a hard place, they no longer have to choose between really good technology that meets their needs and all of the other things that they would need to just do well in their roles outside of the software itself.
The next question I have, though, is that ultimately there's no free lunch. If you're offering a better product and a better service, are you guys just better at delivering it and are able to offer it at the same price? Or are you able to sort of articulate a real additional value add that allows you guys to maybe charge a little bit of a market premium? Sort of like wondering a little bit how that go-to-market motion potentially looks for you guys with the trade-off of providing more value through the software versus keeping your cost basis in check.
I think we consider ourselves premium technology. Accounting Tool is the only real cloud-based fund accounting tool in the market that's dedicated to nonprofits. And on the CRM and fundraising side, there are players out there who do what we do, but we still consider ourselves a premium technology. We're also, I think, trying to be mindful of how nonprofits run their day-to-day and recognize that they can't pay the premium top dollar. And in many ways, what we're able to do is recommend that nonprofits move off of these big horizontal platforms like Sage Intacct and Salesforce and all these big Blackbaud and these other big players that have largely said, we're going to make you pay a lot of money to use bad technology. We've righted that ratio in saying that, no, actually, when you buy our technology and it's paired with really good services, we can deliver the technology at an affordable price for nonprofits and one that encourages them to stick around for many years. The important thing is not just the upfront price, but what other products can you build for nonprofits to grow your relationship with them? And on that front, I think we're seeing a lot of good success with being able to drive cross-sell, as Meera aligned on earlier, and being able to show nonprofits that we are the definitive place for them to get all their most important technology needs, which obviously shows up in our numbers, and it shows up in our growth, and it shows up broadly in the success of the business.
And a follow-up question to that is, my assumption is that maybe a lot of these contract values are probably a little bit smaller, right? And so you kind of have to be very effective in sort of your BDR and your SDR sort of like outreach and motion to attract people. Maybe how do you guys keep your customer acquisition costs in check, given that maybe some of like the lifetime values of these customers are a little bit smaller, getting back to the old school business LTV to CAC ratios? And maybe that's a question for you, Meera. That's
where the job starts to get fun and a little interesting, because what you're trying to do is stand up the best, most efficient sales team or the best marketing team that is really honing in on efficiency. And sometimes when we come into businesses like PE-backed businesses, for example, and I'm sure you'll have questions about what that looks like later, but sometimes you don't get to do quite as much innovation. And I think in a space like ours is where we actually get to start pushing the needle of how efficient can we be, and can we make the best decisions so that way we can't keep that cost basis low.
If you're able to share, maybe could you take us under the hood of maybe like what's sort of like a recent initiative that you guys implemented or project that you worked on to sort of make that as efficient as possible?
Cross-sell's prime for the taking on this one.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, just a couple of months ago now, we launched a cross-sell motion. I think in some ways this was to say, hey, we brought these products together and we're working on the integrations, but there's a lot we want to learn from our customers along the way in terms of who's willing to expand into other products, who's actually going to find value in more than one product and want to stick it out in the long run. We launched a cross-sell motion a couple of months ago and we're starting to see some real wins there. And it's great to see that pick up because month over month, we're finding more and more customers that are willing to adopt a second product, even a third, and more folks who are interested. And the folks who aren't ready to buy just yet, the validating part of that has been the vast majority of those customers are just waiting for the products to become closer together and for the integration to be launched. It's kind of serving two purposes for us. One is it's helping us grow faster. And then two, it's validating the decisions we're making on the product side, helping us get closer to those customers and just build the right solution for them in the long run.
Amazing. In terms of the opportunities for future expansion, it sounds like you guys have been sort of expanding a little bit on the horizontal measure, adding new product lines and also potentially moving up market. Are there any big initiatives that you guys are able to share that are coming sort of in the end of 2024 and of 2025 that you think are going to be big revenue drivers for Aplos going forward?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that come to mind. I think one is we are building and have kind of already started building and are pretty deep into it actually, an R&D center in Vancouver where we are hiring engineers, developers, and designers specifically with the purpose of bringing these three products together. We think this is going to be a huge revenue opportunity in the space. We think nonprofits have been screaming for an integrated cloud, and we've stood up the investments required to make that happen for the user, which I think is really exciting. And we're going to start to see that not just in cross-sell, as Meera mentioned, but we're hoping that it also shows up in new logo ad and in acquiring more customers who are ready to buy a consolidated system. I think second, when Meera had spoken a little bit about making the best-in-class marketing and sales team, I think there is a ton of opportunity for efficiency. This, I think, very literally means getting more traffic, driving more traffic to the site, getting more of those to convert to leads and then to paying customers. There's a ton of opportunity there, and particularly with the angle that we have on best-in-class technology, not having to make a sacrifice between best-in-class and integration. I think we're going to be really successful on driving a ton of efficiency out of go-to-market. And then I think the third is just simply building the awareness of our brand and of our company such that, and of the power of these technologies. Because I think many of our customers also don't really use a specialized accounting tool or don't really use a specialized peer-to-peer tool. They're running things on Google Sheets and they're using Stripe for payments. They don't know that we exist. And a lot of, I think, what will allow us to triple the business in the next 3 years is going to come from just more nonprofits learning about us and hearing about our technology. So those are, I think, some of the big areas that we're trying to invest in next year that we think will drive a ton of value, not just for the user, but for the business too.
Sure, like basically enable more word of mouth growth is sort of what you're talking about in terms of like building more of that like Aplos brand.
I think building out your brand and investing in top of funnel not just leads to organic growth, but it shows up in all of your channels of acquisition. Everything just improves in efficiency. It's a discontinuous step change in improvement. And it's also just a lot of our buyers and a lot of our industry want to be educated on the power of the next generation of technology. Someone's got to take that on. And I think that's what we're excited to go do.
What are some of, you mentioned a lot of times here, like these nonprofits are hungry for the software in terms of trying to get something that is actually dedicated to them. Like what is actually then the business outcomes on the nonprofit side in terms of once they switch over to Aplos? Is it that they're able to raise more money? Is it that they're able to reduce their headcount? What is actually sort of their outcome from this?
So we see this in two ways. On the accounting side, we see efficiency improvements and time. So now they actually have a tool that does dedicated fund accounting, but you just don't get in QuickBooks. It's a time-saving component. On the flip side, when we look at our CRM software and our fundraising software, it's a matter of raising more money. I think the best example I can give is when nonprofits start to use really good technology, they just expand their reach a lot further and a lot faster. A small example is one of our products has donation forms that they can embed on their website or they can send out via emails. And when you use their donation forms versus a legacy carrier, or even actually the legacy Aplos donation forms from many years ago, we found that customers will fundraise 40% more on average just because of the experience that their donors get using their forms.
Wow, that's incredible. 40% is quite a lot, especially for a nonprofit who lives on those donations. That's wild. And You've mentioned a couple of times sort of the PE-backed nature of Aplos, and I'm kind of curious to understand how that materializes in maybe your guys' day-to-day. And to the extent that you're able, Meera, you're at ServiceNow, which is obviously a large public software company. Anush, you sort of came from a little more of that finance background. But how does that sort of manifest it in terms of the way you guys maybe approach investments and approach sort of the way you sort of manage costs? I'm kind of curious if that comes into account anyways, or you just feel that you happen to be PE-backed, but the way you would operate it is actually very much the same as if it was just any other business.
I can take a first pass at that. I think what we strive to do is we strive to build balanced growth businesses, which means that we want to grow and we want to grow profitably. And I think that means that even though we are PE-backed, our investors are fundamentally growth focused. The businesses that we buy are high quality. We have in the Aplos story committed dollars and are really building out innovation and product. And I think that means that we care a lot about serving the market and we're going to invest alongside that view. It doesn't mean that we're going to burn. I think we're not VC backed in that regard. But so long as the growth is there, we continue to invest. And I think that's kind of the big theme of the way that Alpine and ASG think about investing in this business. I think the other cool thing about being a part of Alpine and broadly this program is that Meera and I work with our board to align on a budget going into the year, and we invest that budget. We have a ton of flexibility to be able to move money around based on where we see opportunities as the year goes on. And we have regular interactions with our board to align on where we want to invest and what our capital allocation strategy is, for lack of a better term. And I think that flexibility that they afford us is hugely important, not just in your day-to-day, and that we're not a public company having to always hit these quarterly numbers. We do strive to hit budget, but our boards really care about, are we focused our time on investing for growth? And I think that's been a huge, huge opportunity. Finally, I think our boards have also been really constructive with us. A lot of our board meetings involve strategy points, not financial points. That may be a testament to the fact that we're performing well financially, but I think broadly that's a testament to how Alpine views its relationships with its operators like me and Meera, which is one of strategy and less of did you or did you not hit your gross margin target. I've come to appreciate that, especially because I think it's given me the freedom to allocate the businesses as we see pleased, and it's been super helpful. Anything you'd add to that?
No, I don't think I could have said it better.
Looking forward now, we've talked a lot about sort of like the opportunities for expansion and growth and all the exciting parts, but obviously business is not all just great upward and to the right trends. What are maybe some of the challenges that are top of mind for you guys going into the next year in terms of things that you want to handle and make sure that you sort of keep under wraps to keep the growth going?
There's so much opportunity. Where do we start? I think the pressure that we put on ourselves to deliver at the pace we want and at the quality we want is probably the biggest driver for this, if I'm being honest. We have a customer segment that we are moving towards. The opportunity in that is we get to get creative about how we want to go target them. How do we want to get them in our funnel? How do we message the value prop of our products? Because now we're messaging a little bit differently because it's to a different user, a different buyer, a different segment. And it's not all tried and tested. The creative part of this exercise now is figuring out how much time, energy, how many resources do you want to allocate towards something that's not tried and true, something you're going to do for the first time. So I think that's one of the challenges that we'll be able to uncover a lot from in the coming year. But our teams are working on it and we're really excited because I think the product's come such a long way in the past 2 years alone, being able to serve that mid-market customer. Now it's just a matter of figuring out how do we catch them at the right time? How do we make sure we're valuing or messaging the value appropriately for them?
I think the things that are top of mind for me, in addition to those things, are like, how do we build a culture that attracts the best and brightest in vertical software? Because I think we have a very, very big opportunity ahead of us, and we want to bring on people and not only be changed as a result of them, but change their lives as a result. I think the other thing that we think a lot about is nailing product. I think this is a market where the innovation curve is really high. Customers deserve great products, and we're one of the few people who can deliver on that promise. We've made the first important step of funding that opportunity. The second step is now executing on it. So I think that's the second thing that's super top of mind for us. And I think the third thing, which I think Meera and I spent a lot of time talking about recently, is just making sure that we're doing everything we can to get the product in the hands of all the users possible. There are 2 million nonprofits in the US alone, not to mention all the international markets we play in. So it's just kind of a boundless opportunity. We're pretty convinced that once people know that we exist, this will be a pretty interesting and huge growth opportunity. There's no silver bullet in go-to-market. It's very efficiency-based, as Meera mentioned. It's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's very grindy. And I think that we spend a lot of time thinking about continuing to grind every day towards that goal.
Awesome. Moving into the final sort of segment of our podcast, we always like to do something that's a little bit career advice related, just given that we are an MBA podcast. And the first question that I have for you both is for an MBA who maybe is trying to figure out what they want to do and comes from a very varied array of backgrounds, like how do you recommend they get into this role? Is it whether through Alpine or through anywhere else? How do you ultimately become an operator? And what would you recommend from a skill set standpoint that they work on?
I'll start, and I'm curious what Meera has to say. There's a couple things that come to mind. I think one is extreme ownership. I think in interviewing for the CIT roles and in being involved with operating programs generally, I think one of the things that really makes a difference is, can you tell if the person's going to run through walls? And I think some of our best CITs, our best operators are very good at that. And that's not really like a hard skill. It's kind of like a mentality and an innate mindset. But I think that's super important. I think the other part of it is having a clear understanding of why you want the role. I think oftentimes when you meet young leaders who claim they want to be leaders, and by the way, I put myself in this category, I did not have a great answer as to why I wanted to be CEO. I just wanted the title, but there were many other things behind it that were important. It's really important to have that story down. Really, really important to understand why you want to be a leader. Because I think this job is very beneficial and very awesome, but it's also very hard. So having an answer to that question that you believe every single day is what people look for, and it's what people want to work with. And then I think the third is, this is a little bit more mechanical, but I think it's real. Being able to tell the story of the business through numbers is super, super important. It gives everybody the comfort that you really understand what's going on. I think it also inspires a lot of confidence in your teams that you kind of have a good grasp of how to drive outcomes in your business. And I think particularly on those three characteristics, and particularly the last one, I think both, I don't want to toot our horns, but I think both Meera and I shine in that category, which is being able to decompose a business into its most important levers. That's a little bit more of a hard skill to learn. I don't want that to sound intimidating to people who don't come from finance. I don't think you have to have a financial background to understand how businesses work. It is super important as part of the evaluation process. Meera, what else would you bring to the table?
I think that's a really great summary. I think maybe the color I would add to that is being able to run through walls and decompose the business into the levers that matter most also means an ability to know what to prioritize and not get distracted and not let other fires distract you. Going back to Anush's point around finding your why and holding on to that, the job is really hard and you will get pulled in a lot of directions. If you are somebody who wants this, knows why they want it, and you're the type of person who feels a sense of ownership over everything you do, and it's not just in jobs like this, this comes out in other roles and in any team that you belong on or have been a part of before. If you have that in you and you're able to develop some of the hard skills, I would say that you can learn some of those skills in the job as well. And a lot of the operators at Alpine don't come from finance. The ones who do certainly start with a leg up, but I do think the playing field starts to even out the longer we spend time as operators. And what really defines people and starts to make them stand out is their ability to know why they are there and willing to keep pushing through in the long run as they go about the job.
This point around focus that she just mentioned is probably the A1, A2, A3. One of the most important things that operators bring to companies is a sense of calmness and serenity through focus. Founders are awesome. They do amazing things. But a lot of founders spend a lot of time trying a whole bunch of stuff and pulling the business in a number of different directions. The calmness that an operator brings to the business, which is like, here's the top 3 things we're focused on and only these 3 things, is remarkably important. And that focus is exactly why, like, a lot of times businesses create more value under the operator ownership than the founder ownership. It's not always the case, obviously, but in many, many cases. And I just wanted to double click on that point.
Awesome. Well, this was an incredible episode. Thank you guys both for joining me on this and looking forward to getting it published. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.